Welcome everyone to another, would we call it podcast, guys, or is this technically a vodcast?
I guess it's a
Some,
vodcast. We're still
yeah,
figuring
some,
out the podcast stuff.
there we go. Welcome to our wonderful vodcast, which will soon be a podcast. We want to obviously give you guys an update on what's going on with the Beasts of the Dissonance Volume 1 Kickstarter. Lots of good stuff going on there. Working every day to get it closer to going out to you. Stretch goals, I think, is the best thing to start off with. You guys reached 3 stretch goals. What that included was STLs, specifically terrain STLs, which those are all sculpted, ready. There was also 2 pieces of environment artwork. One of those is already done, and the other one's being worked on. Following that, we had 2 other stretch goals, which included beast. Each one had a new beast from the Beast of the Dissonance STL included, as well as a brand new monster to be added into the manual. Art, lore, everything, stats. So those are all in progress. We've got the artwork back on one that's finished. Long story short, it's all flowing in. It's all looking really good. I'm excited for you guys to see it.
So, Lauren, speaking of that, I think we're gonna throw some of those images up to with the update that's going to be happening very soon. On the screen now, I think if you want to speak to a couple of those models you just did, maybe describe them and we can do some editing here and show some folks, kind of a little bit, give a little bit of the story behind a couple of those sculpts.
Absolutely. The Shadros, which is the most recent one that we have sculpted, the artwork was done for it before we started the Kickstarter. It was one of my personal favorites. I think I'd mentioned it, but Silman's probably my favorite ilk. And the Shadros is part of the Siln ilk. So a medium creature, super agile. One of the coolest things about it is it's part of the kind of a biotech race of monster. And so it has a very unique look to it. It somehow looks both organic and machine-like at the same time. So it's kind of like, what I really enjoy about this type of creature. On top of it, though, it's got like all these hex patterns on it. It can cloak or, turn invisible, essentially. Super cool abilities. The stats, I mean, Kurt, if you remember much from the stats, you could speak to those. But I remember there was a lot of cool details. I think something about it being able to put out markers and then transition between those markers somehow. But yeah, it seemed like a super fun mechanic to kind of play with. It is absolutely unique, like all of our monsters.
Yeah, I doing that one. I really enjoyed doing it as well. The art is fantastic. The sculpt that you just did, I really enjoy that as well. Really trying to come up with a mechanic that really gave it that extra level of flavor, with it being that stealthy and very destructive creature. I'm excited to see how DMs will use that in their encounters. I think you can build a really nice scene and use those mechanics to drive a great narrative. And so, yeah, it has been a little while, I'll be honest, because we're working on all these other monsters. But it wasn't. I think we're at a really good spot with it, mechanically speaking. I definitely had to try to consolidate it a couple different ways to make it really something that you can understand and use it effectively and not take much time to deal with it, because that's the most important thing to me personally. Is time is valuable to each and every one of us. And so whereas we want to be very unique with our monsters and the abilities, we also want to consider your time and your preparation. And the last thing I want to do is have you as a DM or player have to spend a lot of time understanding what the heck's going on there, and so you can spend that time elsewhere to really work with your players and figure out your campaigns.
I think the other fun thing about some of these recent updates is the terrain. You might not think you'd have much environment art or terrain sculpts in a bestiary, but I mean, creatures got to live somewhere. So I think it's just as important to have some really cool art and scenery that kind of depicts, where these creatures come from, maybe where you're going to be fighting them. Just give you a little more variety. It's not tons, but I think it was a good stretch goal, and it'll give you a little more substance.
I thought something good about that, Lauren, was, and hopefully we can be throwing up these images as we're speaking here, but like the Malogs, you have those huts that,
oh yeah,
that I, speak to them, because that was kind of creepy when you were sharing with me, what some of the dynamics of their, how they live, and those STLs and those models that people will be able to print.
Yeah, super, super cool idea. So the Malag are actually they were part of that we sculpted them for the dynamic dungeons. So we had these and decided to give them, just because we got supported. So they aren't even part of a stretch goal. They're just something we wanted to throw in for you guys. But we thought it'd be really cool to add part of their environment, and that's the flesh huts that you were talking about, kind of gruesome or whatever, but I'll give all credit to Kurt on this, because it's actually his cool idea to have these beasts. Well, they're not, they're actually a little less bestial than some of the others in the way they look, but they essentially live one of their main purposes is based around building these furnaces, and with those furnaces, they'll their life just centers around it, and they build these huts around the furnaces, and they'll go out and essentially collect creatures, people, organics, matter, and then bake it down in these furnaces and make themselves these horrifying huts. So yeah, super super gruesome, but kind of a cool aspect in dark, a dark fantasy setting, I think. So yeah, we sculpted some of those. They're kind of cool looking, very basic, kind of simple, I think, but have just a slight dark fantasy, tinge to it to kind of make you think, okay, it's innocent enough looking until you get up on them. But
I did pull up the Shadros, and
oh, cool.
And the ability that you were talking about is the pools of illusion, and essentially the Sadros is able to emit this pink fluid of sorts, and it goes in different areas, and depending on where that's at, it's able to create this image of itself that comes up and is able to deal damage throughout the terrain, and that's one of its legendary actions. So can really create, speaking of environments, this is able to create its own environment or habitat in encounter to make it a lot more dangerous than maybe your party would have thought originally, because you could be in an area, it seems pretty harmless, there's nothing really going around, and then all of a sudden this creature comes in, and before you know it, there's these different pools of fluid around you, and at any given time you could be attacked from that pool of fluid, as this Shadros is able to manipulate itself and project this image that can deal some serious damage. So really fun. I can just imagine an adventurer kind of being like, oh crap, where do I go? What do I do? And trying to get away from these pools of fluids. And
yeah, if you see the artwork for these, for the Shadros, yeah, there's like a big splash of pink in it. It's really cool. And so I just totally imagine a scene of like fluorescent pink paint just like all over the place under a black light. That's kind of like how I imagine it going down in a Shadros encounter. pretty fun. We'll have to play with that monster here sometime soon.
Well, yeah, like those Malag huts, it'd be like your party comes upon these little hills on the backside, and then you start to realize that they're not just hills; they're mounds
Yeah.
of baked adventurers.
Yeah, exactly.
So you start to, you see some different types of battle gear and fur and different all of a sudden you're finding clues baked into the sides of these mounds. Maybe you fall through.
I can imagine like the classic like adventuring party, and they're all of a sudden they're like, oh yeah, let's look for somewhere safe to sleep at night. And like you're saying, Dave, like, oh, look at these nice hills are coming up. Maybe they're like, oh, there looks like a
Oh,
settlement
those
up
are little
ahead.
huts.
And
Yeah.
then they get closer, and then before they know it, they're just like, we gotta get out of here now.
I remember like there's these nice warm little stoves inside that keep it nice and warm, and then they go in there and go to sleep, and maybe that's it's dark outside, but that's the point when they see that there's
Right.
actual like bones grafted into the wall.
I think even as a DM, I might even go to the lengths of like saying that the logs, they put like a mossy covering over the flesh to almost hide it or conceal it, and then one of the adventurers brushes up against the wall, and it just like this
Like
piece, this
falls
huge
off.
piece of sod comes off, and there's just like all these different parts and pieces of organic matter. Anyway.
Oh man.
Yeah. I'm super excited to see that terrain on tables and get that update out there. We'll submit that. We'll put that as part of the update, so the backers, you all can see the great stuff that Lauren has put together.
Cool. What other things you guys want to talk about? Maybe the short story that we've been working on?
Absolutely.
We should.
All right. So, short story. I think I've talked about it before, but I'll bring it up again. I'm just a super massive fantasy novel nerd, like hardcore. I like Brandon Sanderson, Neil Gaiman, all the biggies. I've read pretty much, I don't know, most any fantasy book out there I've probably read. Epic, Grimdark especially, or at least started the series. And then, if I didn't like it, I wasn't going to keep reading it. But hit me up, send a message. You guys can test me, put out some trivia, see if there's a novel that you think I haven't read, and I'll bet you I have read it.
I think let's wait till we get the Kickstarter done before we get you busy answering.
Oh yeah.
On books.
Okay, valid point. But
Lauren's over here trying to start a book club. We're over here. We gotta finish this Kickstarter before we start our book club.
No, that's fine.
Valid points.
That's fun though. Send whatever messages you want.
I digress. Our short story, which I don't know. I think short story, typically you think about 10,000 words, we've got upwards of 20,000 going to be going through editing, some final rounds of editing here. I'm really pleased with it. I think it's a fantastic story. There's all the things you need for a strong dark fantasy story are in this book. It's about vengeance, a man who's betrayed, and essentially, if you've read anything on our Kickstarter, you know that leashers who give a lot to get a lot, essentially their blood, that's what this story is about. That's who this character is. It gives you the perspective of a leasher. It puts you, in that person's shoes and kind of gives you a view into what this world is and how leashers are a part of it. So, if you're into reading books, it'll be awesome because it'll give you a lot of fuel for, hey, this is how my campaign can be run. If you're a GM, I should say. If you're not, then as a player, I mean, that's also fuel there for ideas of how you could play your character in a dark fantasy setting. There's so many applications for it, but all in all, it's got a lot of good lore. It deals it out, I think, in small enough quantities. You don't get, submerged, but at the same time, you get a really good understanding of what the Grinning God universe is about. And yeah, I think you'll enjoy it. I don't know. What did you guys think of it?
But I really liked it. I liked one thing I like you said, someone who wants to play a leasher, they'll have a great flavor for at least this version of a leasher. I loved how there's that flavor of there's this connection to this distant realm that's always kind of there. And you can almost feel the hair on the back of your neck stand up sometimes, because it's almost as if there's things that are hunting you, but they can't really get you. But then your blood, becomes that key to letting some of these, monstrosities and things, come through. And then the dynamics of the other leashers and some of their, when it talks, I don't want to put spoilers out there, but some of how other leashers react to each other. And, it may not be as, a band of brothers, more of a, band of people that try to, the nuances that how they would, treat each other, at least in this version of it, in this story.
Yeah. I think in that vein, do you have anything that you want to share about the leasher class, Dave, since you're heading up a good chunk of getting that all,
Yeah.
finished
No,
up?
I think, yeah. So I'd say going a couple of the highlights, I think, for the class right now is it's built in a way of progression so that someone who wants to play a leasher, they get a good flavor and they learn different mechanics as it goes along. And so someone's just not dumped into this new class that could be perceived as a little bit difficult and new, but we try to do it in a way that is exciting and fresh, but also it's easy enough for someone to get and play it. Some of the early mechanics are with your blood. There's a neat mechanic where if you take damage slashing, so your blood, if you get blood that's sprayed, or you lose HP, there's a save that occurs that the whoever caused that damage to you starts to see some of the monstrosities that follow your character on a daily basis, and they start to get frightened. There's also an ability where your character is able to take their blood and put it on a weapon, and it's the dissonant matter almost forges that weapon and gives you a little bit of a buff. And those features continue on up to level 2. You start to actually select your subclass, which really impacts a huge part of your player and how the rest of your journey is going to be. At that point, you take on, I'll call it a lesser beast, or it's similar to the Find Familiar spell with some nuances that are different. It's not.
Oh, yeah. I was just going to say, yeah. I describe it that way too. I think it's absolutely unique, though, in some of the cool features that you have with that. It gives a little more, has a little more grit, I think, than the Find Familiar.
Yes, it's not a celestial. It's not like a spirit. This is a real living, breathing thing that creeps through the cracks of the dissonance. It's a small version of some of the larger creatures that you can eventually leash and have control of, but it can do a little bit of damage. It can do some of the things that a typical Find Familiar spell, some of the typical 5e creatures can do, but it also is it's a real living, breathing creature that when it dies, and there's ways to get another one.
And there's also, I think, really cool to mention is it, not to spoil too much, but each of these the little, creatures that come to you fit within the category of the ilk. So, and they have just very nuanced abilities based off of which ilk they're from. So if you choose Methylidon as your subclass, then your creature has these cool subtle abilities that match Methylidon. And I won't give any more of that away, but just some super cool little details. So
Yeah, and it goes on to so choosing your ilk is going to be very important at that point. Um, Mechanic to help you get some hit dice, not so much to raise your total HP, but just to help you get some health back because you are going to be letting blood throughout the journey. And so we've been very thoughtful of, hey, how much is a sacrifice versus what you're getting worth. At level 4, you start to actually bring these creatures across, but it's kind of the as they sneak through, they're still kind of connected to the dissonance, and so you can utilize them for a turn or two. If you want them to stay out a little longer, there's some penalties that start to occur, and maybe you don't have control of them very long.
Oh.
So that's where you start to get a level 4 and start to feel the power of the class. And then at level 5 is the true sense of, there you have a pretty powerful creature that is you're able to utilize. We've tried to build mechanics in for one to actually, once you to leash it, to actually have it as your companion. How do we make it so it's fair in combat? Some of it is the player actions. You're able to have the beast do something, or you're doing something. So there's a little bit of scaling there that occurs as you get higher levels. Then you can have your turn and then the creature's turn. There's also some neat things in there to where maybe you don't have the creature with you all the time because you have this creature that weighs a couple 100 pounds that needs to eat large amounts of meat. And maybe in your venturing party, as you've been going around the city, you haven't found the butcher, or you haven't been able to, it wasn't wise to kill everybody's horses and feed the horses to it. So you let it out and let it, and we'll call it free roam, where it's able to go out and forage and do its own stuff, which we thought was a unique flavor to, again, we don't want it to become the whole campaign to become, this character, it's become, how do we feed this creature every day? But how do we make it fun, allow this class to be dynamic? Some of the things
also simple.
that you read about with some of these spells in 5e that allow you to have companion creatures and summon demons. How do we make it so it's a gritty version of it that doesn't blow up a campaign but makes it fun and exciting? And I think we're getting really, really close.
I think one of the biggest takeaways I've seen with the short story and the class itself is just capturing that realism while constrained to the 5e mechanics and background. Because if we could have it our way, I think we would honestly create our own game system that would make it, feel that extreme realism and grittiness. But just we've been very mindful about how we convey these mechanics, this class, so that, going back to what I said earlier, it's something it feels like you've seen it before, but it's unique enough that you feel excited about it. And so it's definitely a challenge. And there are times where we may want to put something else in, but for sake of simplicity, we go that route and try to capture as much flavor as we can to really capture that grimdark, the Grinning God setting. Just kind of backtracking a bit to the short story. I just wanted to say how awesome it was to really see a leasher and the constant battle that this particular leasher had with himself internally. I don't want to give up too much, but I'll just kind of leave it at that. I don't know what the right etiquette is for these types of things, so I don't want to ruin anything. But going back to what David said earlier, is that this story is a perfect segue into actually creating the leisure. Now, you go into the player's handbook and you get a paragraph or two or three. To me, I consider this, this huge story that you could almost consider, if you want to. Obviously, you don't have to read the story, but it really can help you understand and create this character where you can really, if you're into role playing, is kind of give you an idea of how feared or revered the leasher is, depending on who you're encountering. As a GM, how you can portray them within your world, whether it's your own or even if it's a canon 5e campaign. But just being able to really take a lot of great concepts and ideas to make it your own. It's all there in that short story in a way that it's just fun and it's entertaining. Before you know it, you've read an hour or two and you're like, holy cow, man, how do I be a leasher? And then it segues right over into creating your leasher. So it's a really great flow, and I'm excited to have that in the book that we're making, just because it's just it really gives you that impactful vision of how a leasher can be played. And there's a really great excerpt on what to consider as you play as a leasher. And I think it just offers a brand new take on role play opportunities that I personally haven't seen with other classes. Obviously, I'm biased, but I think people are gonna feel like there's a lot of new things as they look at the characteristics and background of this class.
What there's one thing too. We when during playtest, we've sat there and leasher would die, and then it's okay, so now what's happening with this leashed beast? Is it now going to rampage on the rest of my party because that bond is broken, or is it still loyal to the leasher? And so one thing that's and again, so we're going back and forth with the lore as per the short story and per the original Dark Sky fantasy world, and also putting it within the 5e mechanisms, the machine of the Dungeons and Dragons. And what we decided and what it seemed unique is that there's actually, your creature will do a couple basic functions when your player is downed. Instead of just rolling death saves, your creature will, depending on what ilk you chose, your creature will do something unique, as long as you did have a creature with you to help you in some way, or maybe help the party. And so that will also, I think, people will look at that and say, hey, that's kind of a unique thing. And instead of just rolling death saves, I'm able to at least do a little bit of manipulation still on the field. And again, it's not anything that's game breaking, but I think it's a fun mechanic, and it'll definitely drive people to be very selective on the class that they choose. I think it'll be one of those things where they say, hey, that'd be a cool feature. So
Yeah.
Absolutely. I guess now would be a good time to ask you, Kurt, about the stretch goal monsters, because you are currently statting those out, making sure they're all good and ready to go for when we get this out to people. So curious what your thoughts are on these additional monsters.
No, I'm really glad that we're putting in these stretch goal monsters to get additional creatures with a challenge rating that will really flesh out the book and give a lot of versatility and opportunity to the leisure class. Really continuing to be mindful of how they can be used by themselves and as encounters. Even if you don't have, I really want to preface this, is that you don't need to have a leasher in your campaign to use these monsters. These monsters are completely intended to be thrown in and used as your monster from a monster manual. So don't feel the necessity of having a leasher in your party to be able to use these. And so, considering that is, how do I bring these in? How does the lore allow the GM to populate this and make it make sense for them? And I mean, everyone out there, you're all very smart and you'll know how to do that. But as I go and make these, is I want to continue to flush these out and give them all a uniqueness to them. But also from a leasher monster relationship side of things is, how can they play in favor of those 5 discipline, and also how can these monsters be used if they were with a leasher that wasn't of the same discipline as them. And that is also something I that's really important, is that I think the biggest thing is when you choose one of the 5 disciplines is you definitely have a preference as that leasher to go towards those type of categorized monsters. However, it doesn't exclude you from having the opportunity to leash the other ones of the other discipline that you did not choose. It's just there's other mechanics to it. It makes it a little more challenging, but just coming up with opportunities and essentially how the leasher and its discipline narratively is affecting that monster, because you could have a leasher that chooses the Silm discipline, and the way that leasher him or herself or their self wants to train the creature is different than how those of the Methylaidon discipline would. And so if a Silm and a Methylaidon both had a Methylaidon monster, the very same creature, those 2 creatures would benefit a little bit differently, not significantly, but a little bit, by the way they have been trained by the leasher and that relationship. And so just thinking of all those different moving parts and pieces as we wrap up the last 3 or 4 monsters, and then clean them up with edits, trying to make sure that the hit points are all calculated 100% correctly, the damage output, understand the proficiency bonuses, all those little caveats that they're very simple and straightforward. But when you have a book that is now exceeding, I think we're over 45 monsters. I think originally we were saying 40 monsters. Now I think with the lesser creatures that become those dissonant companions that Dave had mentioned when you become level 2, I think we're going to end up having around 55 or something like that. I don't quote me on that. It might be 50, but with the caveat that the lesser creatures aren't much different other than statistically and changing a couple different things. So that's where we're at in terms of the monsters, wrapping those up and getting them to final edits, as well as with the short story and the leisure class. So we're making great progress.
Yeah, and I think regardless, like what you're saying, Kurt, you don't need to play a leasher per se. Just let your DM have a leasher so he can destroy your party with it. And so
That's a great point.
So yeah,
Have it be the big bad evil guy.
They can probably make some pretty rough encounters with a beefed up level 15 leasher with a couple monstrosities at its side.
We've honestly could change the title of this whole Kickstarter. We put together hundreds and hundreds of hours just to create this perfect guide to creating the most epic big bad evil guy. We're giving you hundreds of pages of content to create one of the most epic big bad evil guys of your campaign. So if that's what you're looking for, you're in the right place.
Yeah, I think you guys will definitely like it. Good call outs. I got so into the idea that, playing as a leasher, using all these monsters, how fun that would be. I forgot. Yeah, you can throw these in a normal game, they'll work great. Yeah, that would be awesome too. So, I don't know. What else do you guys want to throw out there? Is that everything we have to talk about tonight?
I think honestly, my final remarks is we did have that play test the other day, and it went really well. There was a couple of great mechanics that Dave had mentioned that we were able to see happen in game, and it went very well. And having some good conversations about minor tweaks and adjustments to really get this character continue to be ironed out. And so when it gets in everyone's hands, it feels like it was worth your time and your trust, because honestly, we do appreciate you supporting us and the trust you've put into us, and we don't want to take advantage of that. And so the three of us take great pride in what we do, and by the time we get this to print, we want to be proud of it ourselves and something that you're happy of supporting. And so that's one of our promises, is to do the best of our ability. And so the playtest went very well. It was a great learning opportunity, and it made us look at things tiny bit differently at times, but continuing to push and hit these deadlines and get things ready for everyone to start getting your content here before long.
I think if you've watched the video this long, I have some t-shirts in my garage, Grinning God t-shirts. I think the first person, once this is posted, that sends a message to us that says, send me a t-shirt, we'll work out what size you want. Under Armour t-shirts with Grinning God, and on the back it says GG bro, I think. So I think BRUA.
How should they reach out? Via the Kickstarter messaging, or if you find this on YouTube,
wherever they comment, if they see us on
Whoever
YouTube
says,
and comment
send me a
there.
t-shirt. I think it's the Kickstarter. I think it's the first one. What other Kurt's our social media?
That doesn't include you, Mom, who I know will watch this. Okay, you don't get a t-shirt.
No,
it's only for special.
No
family backers.
No family
there we go.
backers. As much as we love them, and we couldn't do it without them, we gotta. We'll be
the first ones. We'll see that. Can we?
Hey,
your social media guy.
I'll know who. There's timestamps all over the place anymore. There's nothing we can do where our keystrokes aren't recorded. So I'll be able to know who was the first.
Whoever says send me a t-shirt, we'll reach out to you, get your size, and you'll get a Grinning God t-shirt. That's, again, it's like a nice Under Armour black shirt, and it's has all that.
We may not have every size at this point, but we'll try to get one as close as possible.
Get as close as we can. We got a pretty good
amount.
We could be creative with it. All right.
Sounds good. All right. I don't know. Do we have like an outro or something funny that we say at the end of every
I don't
video?
know. I thought you looked like you were really excited to say something, and then you chose not to. So
well, maybe that could be our like consistent outro, is just acting like we're gonna say something cool and then not.
I don't.
So yeah, thank you. We love you. Let's we'll keep doing our best to bring you great stuff, and we're tracking well on our timeline and the schedule. So, and as we'll see how this video gets edited up. Maybe we've shown a couple cool videos, some cool models and art while we've been talking. But our update will definitely show you some neat things to show you where we're at. Maybe there'll be maybe a blurb from the short story, maybe not, maybe some artwork, maybe, we'll show you some neat stuff though.
All right, everyone. Thanks for watching. Take care.
See you later, guys. Bye.